You did not stop loving your life. You stopped recognizing the person who agreed to it. Tonight, you put the key into your own door, and your hand knows the exact place where the lock resists. A light is on because someone inside expected you. You say the ordinary sentence you always say when you come in. And for 1 second, your chest stays out on the step, as if it has not yet decided that it lives here. Nothing collapsed. The house is still standing. The work still arrives on time. The people who know you still call you by the name you have always answered to. And still, somewhere in the last year, the whole arrangement began to feel like something you maintain rather than something you live inside. That second on the step is the subject, not unhappiness, not a crisis with a name anyone would take seriously. A small delay between arriving and belonging, and the quiet work you do to close it before anyone in the room notices there was a gap. You have become skilled at closing it. That skill is older than this year. You have explanations ready. You are tired. You have been working too long without a real break. You are in a phase, and phases pass. Every explanation is reasonable, which is exactly what makes them useful. A reasonable explanation lets you keep functioning without asking what has actually changed. Rest does not touch it. You come back from a week away, and on the first evening at home, the same hesitation is waiting for you on the step. Exhaustion has a shape. It asks for recovery, and recovery answers it. This is quieter, and nothing answers it. An agreement you made a long time ago has ended, and nobody told the life. Through a Jungian lens, this is the threshold where the persona still functions but no longer carries the full consent of the psyche. It has 3 quiet signs. Rest does not restore belonging. Achievements arrive without an inner return, and the automatic yes that once defined you begins, almost imperceptibly, to hesitate. The old life is still yours on paper. Psychologically, the person who authored it has already begun to change. That is the first sign, and it is the easiest one to explain away. Rest can restore an exhausted body. It cannot renew an agreement the psyche has already withdrawn. What this life was built to achieve is visible. What it was built to prevent is not. That hidden difference will explain how the agreement could end while the structure kept running. The life itself is not the problem, which is what makes it so hard to describe to anyone. Nothing here is cruel. Nothing here needs escaping. You would defend most of it if someone attacked it, and yet defending it and inhabiting it have become 2 separate activities, and only one of them still happens without effort. You notice the second sign in a moment that was supposed to be good. Something you had worked toward for years finally arrived. You read the message twice. You told the people who would be glad. Then you sat in the car with the engine off, waiting for the feeling, and the feeling did not come. You told no one. You assumed it was delayed. You gave it the evening, then the week. You performed the appropriate amount of satisfaction so that nobody would have to worry about you, or ask a question you had no answer for, or look at you differently at work the next morning. The achievement had not lost its value. The person who wanted it had stopped attending. Somewhere between deciding on that goal and reaching it, the one who needed it to mean something stepped quietly out, and the reward arrived at an address where nobody was living anymore. That is the second sign. The reward completes and nothing is credited on your side of it. The third one takes longer to appear, and when it does, other people will notice it before you do. Every life is built by someone. Yours was built by a specific person, with specific information, making a calculation that made sense at the time. That person chose the work, the standard, the pace, the people they wanted to be reliable for. They were not naive. They were solving something real. What they were solving may be the part you have never looked at directly. Perhaps they were solving unpredictability. Perhaps they were solving the risk of ever needing anyone. Perhaps they were proving something to a room that has since emptied. The structure they built worked so well that nobody, including you, ever had to ask what it was built for. A life that works is very difficult to question. Failure invites revision. Success does not. When the arrangement keeps delivering, there is no crisis to force a reckoning, and the agreement renews itself every morning without ever being read again. Mornings hold the clearest version of it. You wake slightly before the alarm, already accounted for. Before your eyes are fully open, the day has organized itself into obligations, and you meet them accurately. Inside that accuracy is a person doing everything correctly and asking no one, including themselves, whether they still agree. The structure you built sits close to what Jung called the persona, not a lie, a form, the shape a person takes in order to work, belong, be trusted, be recognized. A persona becomes painful only when it stops being one part of a life and becomes the only address at which a person can be reached. Yours was a good form. It earned you real things and real affection. People relied on it and were not wrong to. It was never false. What changed is the inner necessity it once matched, and a form has no way of knowing when the necessity underneath it has quietly moved. So you keep the form running. At dinner you answer questions about the plan with the correct amount of energy. Your voice takes its old shape before you decide to give it. You hear yourself describing next year in the tone of someone already looking forward to it, while part of you listens from further back, like a guest at your own table. Afterwards, you notice your jaw is tired, not from talking, from holding a face that agreed with everything you were saying. The reaction had arrived before the explanation, and you drove home, assembling reasons for a fatigue that had no event behind it. Calling this dishonesty would be too easy. You are not lying to them. You are protecting them from a question you cannot yet answer, and protecting yourself from holding that question out loud in a room where somebody would immediately want it resolved by the end of the evening. Here is what the performance buys. As long as the life still looks authored, nobody asks you to author it again. Continuity is a form of shelter. It keeps the large questions at a distance, and it spares you the one thing that unsettles you far more than dissatisfaction ever has, which is not knowing. If you admitted plainly that your life has stopped feeling like yours, the room would want a decision: leave, or be grateful, change something, or stop complaining. Both answers arrive within a minute, and both of them end the question before it has finished forming. You do not have a decision. What you have is an accurate perception with no instruction attached to it. Everything in your training says a perception must be converted quickly into a plan. And this one refuses. That refusal is not weakness. It is the first honest thing in a long stretch of competent years. Other people hold the agreement too, and they hold it in good faith. Your steadiness carries weight in several lives. Someone counts on the version of you that does not waver, and they are not wrong too. Nobody set that as a trap. It is simply what happens when a form works well for everyone who comes near it. The two available exits are escapes from the same discomfort. Gratitude closes the question by turning the perception into a moral failing. Destruction closes it by turning the life into the offender. Neither requires you to look at what actually happened, which is that a person changed inside a structure that could not change with them. There is grief in this, and it is an unusual kind. You cannot mourn something that is still standing. Nothing has been taken from you. Everything you built is present and functioning. What went missing is the sensation of standing behind it. And grief, without an event, does not get named. It gets called moodiness or ingratitude. The unlived life rarely announces itself with a new ambition. It arrives first as a loss of authority inside the old one. Something postponed so that you could become discompetent has stopped waiting politely. You can test this in small ways. Say your plan for the coming year aloud when you are alone. Notice that the sentence is entirely correct and produces nothing in you. Then notice how fast you move on, because there is no obvious use for a statement that is true and empty at the same time. The question was never whether this life is good. The question is who inside it is still being kept alive by it. Somewhere in the routine, there is a version of you that the entire structure was designed to protect, and that version has been retiring for a while now without ever submitting notice. You may have assumed the feeling would be temporary, that it would resolve if you improved something. More discipline, a cleaner schedule, a different position. Each adjustment briefly restores the sensation of authorship, and then the hesitation returns, arriving slightly earlier than it did the time before. What is happening is not a failure of gratitude, and it is not the beginning of an escape. It is the moment a structure outlives the agreement that built it. Your life did not stop being yours. It stopped being something you were still being consulted about, and the consultation ended so gradually that no meeting was ever missed. And standing in the doorway of a life you would still defend, the thing you cannot yet tell is which parts of it you would choose again. If the choosing began today with the person you have actually become, the question stays unanswered because the life was never chosen in a single moment you could return to and examine. There was no evening when you sat down and decided on all of this. There were only reasonable choices made one at a time, each of them correct in isolation, none of them announcing what they were slowly building. That is how a structure gets made without an author present. You accept a responsibility because refusing it would cost more than taking it. You stay somewhere an extra year because leaving would waste what you have already invested. 12 sound decisions later, something exists that nobody exactly designed and everybody now depends on. But this is only the surface. Your old life did not become unfamiliar merely because you changed. It became unfamiliar because much of it may have been built to protect you from a danger that no longer exists. But there was a beginning, and it was probably not dramatic. For some, The policy began during a period when the shape of life sat inside someone else's decision, another person's timing, judgment, or willingness. For others, it began in a home where being useful was the safest way to belong, where having fewer needs kept the atmosphere calm, or where competence was the only form of protection that could not be taken away. The circumstances differ. The policy is often the same. Never again let the outcome of your life depend entirely on what someone else is willing to give. It was an intelligent policy. It solved something real. It is also still running. Years after the conditions that wrote it may have disappeared. So you became the one who is consulted rather than the one who waits, the one who provides rather than the one who asks. You built competence others could not easily replace. You made yourself legible, dependable, difficult to move around without asking. Every year of that construction felt like ambition. Some of it was closer to insurance. Here is the hidden difference. Ambition wants something. Insurance prevents something. A life driven by wanting keeps checking whether the want is still alive. A life driven by prevention never checks, because the danger is assumed to be permanent, and permanence does not schedule reviews. And it worked. This is the part people skip when they talk about lives like yours. The arrangement was not a mistake you have finally caught. It delivered. It produced security, respect, capacity, a name people trust before they meet you. Those were not consolation prizes. They were exactly what you set out to obtain. It also made specific things possible for other people. Someone finished something because you carried the weight underneath it. Someone had a stable year because your year was stable. That is real. Any account of this that treats your structure as merely a cage is lying to you about what it actually accomplished. At work, it settled into a particular form. You became the one who absorbs. The complication comes to you because you handle complications. Nobody asks whether it is a good day to bring you the difficulty, because the answer has never varied enough to make asking worthwhile. There is a hidden convenience inside being the one who absorbs. If you are always the one holding the weight, nobody ever has to determine how much you can hold. The question of your limit stays theoretical, and a limit that stays theoretical never has to be defended, or discovered, or grieved. Here is what the arrangement paid you, and it was not money. It paid you legibility. Everyone who deals with you knows who they are dealing with. That is an enormous relief for a person who once had to be interpreted by someone with the power to get it wrong. Being knowable removed the need to be examined. You can feel the complex operating when the structure is touched. Someone proposes a change to a plan you have already arranged, and something tightens before you have formed an opinion. Through a Jungian lens, a complex does not consult you first. It reacts, and then hands your reasoning the job of explaining why the reaction was appropriate. You watch it happen on your phone. A message arrives asking you to shift something, and your thumb pauses above the reply while you calibrate a tone that will sound generous rather than resistant. The generosity is real. The pause is where the older policy checks whether your life is being decided somewhere you are not. In close relationships, it took a gentler form. People came near a version of you that did not waver, and they loved it, and they were right to. Steadiness is not a trick. What steadiness does, over years is teach everyone around you which questions are unnecessary. Nobody asks a load-bearing wall how it is doing. Your people are not at fault here. They responded accurately to what you presented. The version of you they hold is not a misunderstanding they should have seen through. It is a well-made likeness of the form you offered them, kept faithfully, and now slightly out of date in ways you have not given them any way to know, which brings the second payment into view. As long as you were relied upon, you did not have to be known. Reliance feels close to intimacy and asks far less of you. Someone can depend on you for years and never learn what you want, because your wanting was never the thing under discussion. Even your solitude carries the design. The hours that belong to no one are still shaped. You use them to prepare, to catch up, to get ahead of the coming week. Rest that produces readiness is not rest. It is maintenance performed on the instrument, and the instrument is you. Unstructured time is the one condition the arrangement cannot metabolize. Hours with nothing owed to them ask a simple question that has no operational answer. What do you want to do now? You have noticed how quickly you fill those hours, and how the filling feels like discipline rather than avoidance. Responsibility joined the structure last and made it feel permanent. Commitments stretched years ahead. Obligations could not be reversed without harming people who had done nothing wrong. Each was taken up in good faith, and each also performed a second service. It closed enough of the future that the question of what you wanted no longer had to arise in any actionable form. Then every transition rebuilt the same architecture in better materials. New role, new city, new project, new phase. The surroundings improved, the internal arrangement did not. What Jung understood about unconscious repetition is that a pattern does not repeat because you failed to learn. It repeats because its logic has never been made conscious enough to argue with. Success kept confirming the policy, so the policy was never reviewed. There is also the cost of dismantling, which is not imaginary. If you loosened your grip on any of it, actual people would feel it. Schedules would strain. Someone would have to become more responsible than they currently need to be. You are not staying out of cowardice. You are staying because leaving would send the bill to people who did not order anything. The deepest payment was never security. It was the end of self-examination. When your identity is settled and confirmed by everyone around you, you no longer have to ask who you are on any given morning. You may know your traits with unusual precision, but a description written at one moment stops being knowledge when the person changes and the file is never opened again. Jung described individuation as a movement toward becoming less divided and less governed by a role that was never consciously chosen. What almost no one says is that it costs you your settled description. Before you become less divided, you lose the familiar account of yourself that made every ordinary day navigable, and the payment has recently stopped arriving. People still rely on you. The reliance still works. What has gone missing is the internal return, the small confirmation that used to accompany being the one who could be counted on. This is why the second sign hides inside success. The achievement still completes. The inner return does not. You felt it plainly the last time someone praised the exact trait you are known for. They meant it. It was accurate. and something in your chest went flat while they were still speaking, and you gave them the appropriate response with your face, while quietly wondering why the compliment had landed on a surface with nothing behind it. Because the insurance may still be paid on a danger that has passed. Your life may no longer depend on another person's mood, approval, timing, or willingness. You may no longer need to earn belonging by being useful, but the policy continued anyway, collecting from you every year, protecting you from conditions that disappeared before much of this life was built, which leaves a question the structure has no way to process. If the thing you were defending against no longer exists, then what exactly is all of this still defending? And what would remain standing if you stopped paying for it? You cannot yet tell whether the answer is freedom or exposure, and the difference matters more than you would like to admit. And this is where the stage becomes more unsettling. When the old structure loses authority, freedom is not the first thing you feel. Exposure is. Freedom is a word you can admire from a distance. Exposure is what you meet on the first ordinary morning, when nothing about your day has already been decided for you. You have tested this without meaning to. A meeting cancels and 2 hours open in the middle of an afternoon. For the first 10 minutes, something in you lifts. Then a low restlessness arrives, and you find yourself doing something useful before you have consciously chosen it. And only later does it occur to you that nobody asked. The restlessness is not laziness disciplining itself. It is the sensation of standing in time that has no claim on you and finding that you do not know what you would reach for. That is the exposure, not danger, not judgment, just the discovery that your wanting has gone quiet from decades of never being the deciding factor. Here is the part that is harder to say. The structure did not only take from you, it spared you something you have never wanted to look at directly. And that sparing is why it has survived long past its usefulness. If your life is fully accounted for, you never have to find out what you would do with a life that was not. You never have to discover whether you have any pull toward anything that serves no one. You never have to risk wanting something and learning that the want is small, or unimpressive, or already too late. Consider what your reliability has quietly controlled. As long as you are the one who gives, nobody is ever in a position to disappoint you. A person who needs nothing cannot be let down. That is not virtue. It is the most complete protection available against whatever first taught you that needing. Waiting, or depending on someone else, was unsafe. You did not choose that consciously, but you have kept choosing it. Every time you handled something yourself rather than asking, every time you absorbed a complication instead of letting someone else carry it badly, every time you decided it was simpler to do it than to explain it, each of those was a real judgment. Each one also kept the risk of being failed at a safe distance. And it has cost the people around you something they never got to know about. They were never permitted to be adequate to you. They could not fail you, which sounds generous, but it also means they were never trusted with the chance to succeed. Your steadiness held them at a fixed distance and called the distance care. Someone offered you help this year, not vaguely, a specific offer with real intent behind it, and your first movement was not gratitude. It was a rapid internal accounting of what accepting would obligate you to, followed by a light refusal that arrived before you had finished considering it. Your hand was already reaching to close the conversation before your mind had produced a reason. Afterwards, you told yourself the reason. It was not a big thing. They had enough on. It was faster this way. Every sentence was true, and none of them explained the speed. What you refused was not the assistance. It was the position of being someone who needs, in front of a person who might then get to decide how much of that need they were willing to meet. Through a Jungian lens, this is where the shadow enters through the virtue. The generosity is genuine, and it is also the most reliable way to never be at anyone's mercy again. This is not an accusation. The shadow is not a flaw discovered late. It carries what the conscious identity could not permit, and what your identity could not permit was the vulnerable position of needing without control. Being the one who provides became the only version of proximity that did not reproduce that feeling. The hardest cost is the one nobody would call a cost. You have been trusted for a very long time and known for a much shorter one. Trust is not a lesser thing. It is simply not the same thing. And you have arranged a life in which the first is abundant precisely because the second was never possible without exposure. You have wondered whether there is anything underneath the function at all. That fear is not evidence of emptiness. It is what it feels like when a part of you has waited so long that it stopped announcing itself, and silence gets mistaken for absence by the very person it is waiting inside. The unlived life does not shout, it withdraws authority. That is its whole method. It cannot make you want something new, but it can remove the sensation of rightness from everything chosen in its place, until the structure keeps running perfectly and returns nothing at all. Your body has been keeping a more honest record than your calendar. The tiredness that arrives before the conversation rather than after it, the slight relief when plans dissolve, the way your breath changes on the drive home in the last few minutes, as though something is preparing to be held for the evening. None of this is a case for leaving. That is the trap waiting at the end of every recognition like this one. And it is a false exit. Dismantling the structure would relocate you and reproduce it, because the policy would travel with you and start building again by the end of the first year, more comfortable and just as sealed. The real difficulty is smaller and much less satisfying. You would have to stay inside a life you would still defend while admitting that you no longer know which parts of it you would choose. No decision resolves that. No plan converts it. It has to be carried, and carrying it is not something you have any practice in, because your entire competence was built on converting perception into action quickly. You see, you assess, you act, and the discomfort ends. This perception refuses conversion, and you have been experiencing that refusal as a personal failure rather than as the first thing in years that could not be handled by being more capable. Sit with the possibility that nothing needs to be done this year. Not resignation, something more precise. The recognition can be allowed to remain true while the obligations continue being met. And both facts can occupy the same life without either one being resolved into the other. That is not comfortable. It is also not nothing. The delay at your own door has stopped being a symptom of something wrong with you. It has become information about an agreement that expired, and information can be lived beside in a way that a symptom cannot. You will still absorb the complication tomorrow. You will still be the one who is consulted, and mostly you will still want to be. What has changed is small and unrepeatable. You can now see the difference between the parts of it you are choosing and the parts that are simply still running. And that distinction did not exist in you a year ago. The structure has not lost its grip. It has lost its invisibility, and a policy you can finally read is no longer the same thing as a policy that reads you, even on the days when nothing about your schedule changes at all. The third sign arrives in your own voice, and other people hear it before you do. It happens somewhere ordinary. A request comes toward you with the usual assumption attached, and instead of the immediate yes that has always followed, there is a pause while you actually consider it. You still say yes, but the pause was audible, and afterwards the room is very slightly different. The first people to notice will not notice the recognition. They will notice half a second of delay where there never used to be one, and they will feel it before they can name it. And most of them will assume something is wrong. Someone will say you seem distant. Someone else will say you have been off lately. These are not attacks. They are accurate observations made with the only instrument available to them, which is the version of you they have known for years and have no reason to doubt. And there is something they are correct about that you should not argue with. You have become less immediately available, not colder, less automatic. The response that used to arrive before you had finished hearing the question now takes a moment, and a moment is enough to feel like withdrawal to someone who has never had to wait for you. What they are meeting is a policy that has stopped running silently. From where they stand, there is no way to tell the difference between a person who is reconsidering and a person who is pulling away. And you will not be able to explain it in a sentence. Someone may say they miss the old you. Take that seriously rather than defensively. They are not necessarily missing your compliance. They may be missing the ease of a relationship where they never had to check. And that ease was real, and they had years of it, and it is genuinely being lost. Some of them are grieving access. Some of them are grieving certainty, and some of them are simply fond of you and unsettled by change in a person they had learned to rely on for not changing. All three can be true in the same person, in the same week, without any of them being a fault. The impulse to reassure everyone will arrive very fast, and it will feel like kindness. Notice the speed. Notice that it does not require you to know whether the reassurance is true. Restoring the old certainty is the oldest way you have of ending discomfort in a room. The work will register it too. A complication will come toward you, and you will hold it for a second before absorbing it. And someone will look up because that second was not in the script. Mostly you will still take it. Occasionally you will not. And the thing will be handled badly by someone else, and the world will continue. That last part matters more than it sounds. You have carried an unexamined belief that the structure depends entirely on your consistency. Watching something get done imperfectly without you is a small piece of evidence against a very large assumption, and evidence accumulates slowly. There will be a day when someone offers help and you accept it, not gracefully. You will feel the debt calculation start immediately, and you will notice yourself planning how to repay before they have finished. Accepting anyway, while the discomfort runs, is the whole event. Nothing about it will feel like growth. Afterwards, there may be an odd flatness rather than relief. Being helped remove something for a moment You are not the one holding the weight, and the identity built on holding it has nothing to do. That emptiness is not a sign you were wrong to accept. It is what the space feels like before anything has moved into it. Then something ordinary will happen and you will not convert it. A conversation that requires nothing of you, half an hour on a Saturday that does not become preparation for Monday. A meal you actually taste rather than get through. These are not breakthroughs. They are minutes that do not report to anything. The old obligations will continue and you will keep meeting them. That is not a failure of the recognition. Most of what you build is still worth standing behind, and the point was never to determine that your life was a mistake. The point was to end the era in which the question could not be asked at all. That knowing is the whole of what has shifted. It does not lighten anything. It does not resolve the question of which parts you would choose again. It only means the life is being lived by someone who is present at it, rather than maintained by someone who left the building years ago and kept sending instructions. You will still be reliable. That was never the problem, and dismantling it would have been a punishment rather than a change. What may loosen is the requirement that reliability be the only address at which you can be reached. And there is a difference between a form you inhabit and a form that speaks for you. Something may open in one relationship, and it will not look like a confession. More likely, it happens in a kitchen with the tap running, in the middle of something else entirely. They say it without accusation, almost gently. While drying their hands, you've gone somewhere, and instead of the reassurance, you say the true thing. I think I have. Then the tap goes off. The sentence stays in the room. Neither of you does anything with it. And the evening continues exactly as it was going to, and nothing collapses. It may land badly another time. Someone who has known you for 20 years as a settled fact does not update quickly, and the second sentence may be met with a silence you have to sit inside. But the sentence will have been said, and the next one will be marginally less difficult. And this is how a person gets known in the ordinary way, without any moment that would look important from outside. The wanting tends to come back in small forms first, not a new ambition, a preference, the mild pull toward something that serves nothing and would be difficult to justify if anyone asked. Do not interrogate it too early. It has been quiet for a long time, and it does not respond well to being examined for usefulness. The grief will still visit. There is a person who built this life and solved a real problem with it, and that person is not returning, and something is owed to them. They were not naive. They were doing the most intelligent thing available with what they knew. Letting the arrangement lose authority is not a verdict on them. You can hold both. The structure protected you, and it also kept you from being known. The reliability was real love, and it was also a way of controlling how much anyone could fail you. Neither of those cancels the other. And the pressure to choose one as the true version is the last thing that wants to close the question. Some evenings the delay will still be there at the door. You will put your key in, and your chest will hesitate on the step. What may differ is that you no longer treat it as a symptom of ingratitude, and you no longer immediately manufacture a reason, and the hesitation lasts its full length, and then you go in. You are not going to arrive at certainty about your own life. Most people do not. What has become possible is smaller and more durable than certainty, which is the ability to remain inside something unresolved without needing to escape it or defend it or convert it into a plan by the end of the week. Nothing about your address has changed. Nothing about the schedule has been announced. And yet the agreement is no longer being renewed in silence every morning, which is not the same as being rewritten, but it is the difference between a life that runs you and a life you are standing in. The old life stopped feeling like yours because you stopped being absent from it.